For 37 years, I thought about retirement the way most people think about a vacation they've been planning for a long time. Someplace you've earned, someplace warm, no obligations, no phone calls you have to answer, no one needing you for anything they can't handle themselves, no deal waiting, no flight to catch, no problem requiring your specific version of the solution. I thought, when I get there, I'm going to feel free. I built my whole life around getting there. I sacrificed things to get there. I told myself, and Barbara more than once, that it would all make sense once we got there. I genuinely believed it. My name is Alan Rosen. I'm 68 years old, and I want to tell you something about the retirement dream, the one we sell ourselves, the one that looks like a commercial for somewhere tropical with music in the background, that nobody had the honesty to tell me before I arrived. I felt useless, not for a day, not for a week. For about 8 months, I woke up every morning and felt, in a way I didn't have language for at the time, like I had stopped mattering, like the thing that told me I existed had been switched off, and I was walking around in the dark, running my hand along walls, looking for the switch. That's not what the brochure says, I know. But that's what happened. I had money, I had a wife I love, I had a home in Florida and another property up north, family that was healthy and nearby, grandchildren I got to see more than ever before. Eli was 8 that first year, named partly after my father, which means something to me, and I had more time with him than I ever had while I was running. And I sat at this desk, right here, the same desk, in the mornings, with my coffee, and felt something I couldn't name, something I didn't recognize, because I'd spent 37 years moving fast enough that it never had a chance to catch up to me. Retirement caught it. I want to talk about that today. Not the financial piece. I'm not your advisor. I've never been anyone's financial advisor, and I wouldn't pretend to be. I want to talk about what happens on the inside when the thing that defined you for decades is suddenly not required anymore. What it does to how you see yourself, what it does to your mornings, what it took me and Barbara to start to understand what was actually happening and what it would take to come out the other side of it. Because I don't think I'm the only one. And I think if you're heading toward retirement, or if you're already there and you recognize something in what I just said, it helps more than you'd expect to hear someone else say it in plain language, without a system attached, without a prescription. Just, this is what happened. I stepped back from the business around 64. It wasn't forced, I want to be clear about that. I chose it. I'd spent years building the structure around it, setting up the people and the processes so it wouldn't need me present to keep running. That was deliberate. I was proud of it. I'd built something that didn't require me. I thought, that's what success looks like. You build something that outlasts your involvement. Nobody told me that the day it ran without me would feel the way it felt. We're in Florida. I remember a specific morning, a Tuesday, early before Barbara was up. I'd always been early because there was always something to get to. That early morning feeling of the day ahead being full of things. And I sat down with my coffee and I looked at the calendar, and there was nothing on it, nothing urgent, nothing required, nowhere I had to be by any particular time, no one waiting on me for anything. I sat there for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to do with that feeling, and I couldn't get anywhere with it. So I called the office, just to check in, to hear what was moving. The person who answered said, "Mr. Rosen, everything's fine. Are you looking for anyone specific?" I said no. I hung up. That was the first sign that something I hadn't planned for was already underway. So I want to go through what I've come to understand about all of it. Not steps, just things I noticed, things I wish someone had named for me before I was in the middle of them. Here's the first one, and it took me longer to see it clearly than it should have. The business wasn't something I did. It was how I knew I was real. I know how that sounds. I'm not a person who talks like this normally. Barbara would raise an eyebrow. But there's no more accurate version of the sentence, so I'll leave it. When you spend 37 years in motion, decisions, problems, people calling you, things requiring your attention, your judgment, your specific way of seeing a situation. You stop noticing that the motion itself has become the proof that you're significant, that you matter, that what you do has value in the world because people require it, and you're the one who has it to give. The phone rings, you answer. Someone needs something, you have it. The deal is waiting and you close it. The problem surfaces and you're the one who gets called, not because you're the only person on earth, but because you're the right one for this particular thing. That's not just a job, that's identity. And the gap between those two words only becomes clear when one of them disappears. Because I didn't quit the business and find out I'd lost a job. I quit the business and found out I'd lost the primary way I understood myself, the way I knew each morning that I had a reason to exist at the volume I'd been living at. Take that away, not because you failed, not because anyone pushed you out, but because you built it well enough that it keeps moving on its own. And what's left? I didn't know. That was the answer. I genuinely did not know. I'd expected the adjustment to be logistical. Find new hobbies, figure out the schedule, more travel, more time with the grandkids, maybe learn something I'd always been too busy for. I thought the adjustment was the logistical version of a transition. I did not think it meant sitting in a house at 6 a.m. not knowing who I was, now that no one needed me by 9. Barbara noticed before I said anything. That's always how it goes with us. We were in the car, coming back from dinner at Rachel's, a Sunday evening, maybe 2 months into retirement, and she was quiet for a few minutes, looking out the window. And then, without looking at me, she said, "You know it's okay if you miss it." I said, "I don't miss it." She didn't say anything back, which is exactly what she does when I've said something we both understand is not quite right. She was correct. I did miss it. But missing it wasn't the main problem. You can miss things and still be okay. People miss things all the time and find their way through it. The main problem was that I didn't know who I was anymore. Once the thing I'd built my identity around wasn't the thing defining me. Missing it was the surface. The emptiness underneath was something else. Here's the second piece, and this one is harder to say. I tried everything the retired person is supposed to try, and none of it worked the way I thought it would. Golf. In the first 6 months of retirement, I played more golf than in the previous 15 years combined. I want to be honest about something. I don't love golf. I never did, not as a thing in itself. I played it in my working years because it was where certain conversations happened, where certain relationships were built. It served a purpose. But as a thing I genuinely enjoyed for its own sake, it was okay. Some days better than others. In retirement, I played it because it gave the day a shape. Tea time at 8, done by noon, lunch after. That was the whole thing. The shape was the point. The game was incidental. I was buying structure with a golf cart and I knew it and I played anyway, because at least for those 4 hours, the day had a reason. Barbara and I took a trip. Italy, 2.5 weeks. Beautiful. One of the better experiences of our marriage, if I'm being honest. We ate well, we walked, we saw things worth seeing. I was glad to be there with her. And I was on my phone the entire first 3 days trying to check on things that didn't need me to check on. She said one afternoon very evenly, "Put it away." I did. And then I spent the rest of the afternoon feeling something I can only call anxious, like a person at a party who doesn't know anyone and can't find the door. I kept thinking, I should be relaxed. The conditions for being relaxed are all present. I have time. I have somewhere beautiful. I have Barbara next to me. Why is this uncomfortable? The answer, which took me the rest of the trip to admit, was that I'd brought myself to Italy. Whatever was unresolved inside me was sitting right there in the window seat on the way over. Location doesn't fix the internal thing. It comes with you. Here's the third piece, and I'll say it directly. The money didn't solve it. I say this because I think some people, particularly people watching someone in my position, assume that if you have enough of it, the transition takes care of itself. that the disorientation is a financial problem at heart, and once the finances are solid, the rest follows. It doesn't. That's not how this works. I had the resources to go anywhere, do anything, take any trip, not worry about any single expense we might ever have. And I was sitting in a beautiful house feeling like a man who had retired from being himself. That's the most accurate sentence I have for it. The retirement I'd planned was fine. The retirement I was actually living felt like watching someone else drive a car I'd built. The thing moving forward, doing what it was supposed to do, not needing me at the wheel. My father, he came here with nothing, built something small and solid, never talked about money, but was never without what was needed. He used to say that a man who keeps his word is worth more than a man who has money. I understood that differently at 31 than I did at 40 than I do now. At 31, I was broke enough that it was instruction. In retirement, I understood it in a third way I hadn't expected, because what I was struggling with had nothing to do with money. It was about worth in a different sense, the sense that you're contributing something the world actually requires. When the business ran without me, I stopped feeling like I was contributing something required, and there is no financial solution to that particular problem. The fourth thing took me the longest to face. I had been telling myself, quietly, that the busyness was the problem, that what I needed was the rest, that 37 years of constant motion had depleted something, and the stillness would restore it. That was wrong. The stillness wasn't restoration. The stillness was exposure. All the years of motion had kept certain questions at a distance, things I hadn't asked, things I'd deferred, things I'd told myself I'd think about later when things slowed down. The stillness brought them directly to the front of the room. What do you actually enjoy, Alan, when there's no deal to close? Who are you when no one's waiting on you? What does a day look like when you're not measuring it by what got done? I didn't have good answers, and I think this is what I believe now. The reason I didn't have them was that I'd spent 37 years never being required to find them. The motion was productive. It was also, in a way I couldn't see while I was inside it, a way of never asking, a way of being too busy for the questions that don't have clean answers. Retirement asks them, whether you're ready or not. Barbara said this differently. She said, a few months in, after she'd watched me play golf I didn't really want to play, and come home from Italy still carrying the same tension, she said, you need something to do with all this. She meant the thinking, the way I process things, the experience, the particular angle I have on situations from having lived them. She didn't mean a new project in the old sense. She meant you need a place to put yourself, the actual you, not the version that fills the hours, but the version that has something worth giving. That sentence took me a few months to fully absorb, but I kept coming back to it. You need a place to put yourself. Here's the fifth thing, the feeling I've been describing, the uselessness, the disorientation, the not knowing who you are once the structure is gone. I believe it's more common than the people around us realize. I think people walk into retirement feeling this and assume it means something went wrong with them, with their plan, with their finances. And because the feeling seems wrong, because it seems ungrateful, because they have what they worked for, they don't say it. They play golf they don't really want to play. They take trips and come home still tense. They sit in the morning feeling something they can't name, and they keep it to themselves, because the feeling doesn't make logical sense given everything they have. I kept it to myself for a while. Barbara is the only one who saw it early, and only because she's known me long enough to tell the difference between when I'm actually fine and when I'm performing fine. Saying it out loud didn't fix anything, but it was where the fixing started. I don't have a system. I'm not going to give you the 5 steps to a meaningful retirement because I don't have them and I don't trust them. What I have is, It took about 8 months for the ground to start feeling solid again. Barbara saw it before I admitted it and was patient in a way that was more than I deserved. The thing that helped was not more money or more travel or more golf. It was finding something specific and small that needed the particular version of me. The thinking, the experience, the way I see things that came from the specific life I happened to live. And the willingness to say out loud that the retirement I dreamed about and worked toward left me more disoriented than starting over at 31 did. Because at 31, at least I knew what I was doing, climbing. The direction was clear even when everything else wasn't. In retirement, I had to figure out what direction means when you're not measuring altitude anymore. I'm still working on that. I don't have the complete answer, but I'm not sitting at the desk at 6 a.m. not knowing who I am. Most days. That's the honest version. I spent 37 years building something that would run without me, and when it finally did, I felt like the most useless man in a very comfortable room. My name is Rosen. I'm 68 years old, and the retirement I planned didn't feel like freedom, not for a long time. Let me tell you what actually happened. Tell me something honest. When you imagine retirement, or if you're already in it, is there a part of you that isn't sure who you are without the work? Drop it in the comments. Whatever version of it you have, I read every one. If this landed for you, if any part of it sounded like something you've been thinking but didn't say, hit the like button. And if you know someone who's close to retiring or already there and feeling something they can't quite name, send this to them. These conversations don't happen out loud enough, and they should. Barbara would tell you I dragged my feet on starting this channel for 2 years. If you want more of this, honest talk, no gurus, no 5-step systems, subscribe. A new video goes up every week. That's what we do here. All right, take care of yourself.